Well, folks, it has been a wild one out there, and we've got a wild one for you on this episode of the Michael Steele podcast. So glad you can join us. So we're going to welcome to the table Michael Cohen, the former attorney and personal fixer for Donald Trump. He's the host of Mea Culpa. It's not just a podcast, it's a movement, right? Former special counsel to President Trump from 2017 to 18, and also executive vice president for the Trump Organization back in the day. So we're going to get into all kinds of good conversation around lawsuits, Roe versus Wade, midterm elections, and a whole lot more coming up next on the Michael Steele podcast. Michael Cohen, hey, look, turnabout is fair play, brother. It was a pleasure doing your podcast last week, and guess who's in the house this week?
We got Michael's in the house.
Michael's in the house.
Michael's squared. Michael's squared.
It is such a pleasure getting you back on the podcast, and congrats to you on the success of Mea Culpa, which is doing really well and shaking up the landscape out there. And speaking of shaking up the landscape, we had this week something that is unprecedented in the annals of the Supreme Court and certainly the country as a whole, to have leaked in the middle of the drafting session of an opinion on the Roe versus Wade matter by Justice Alito. And the leaking of that has caused quite a stir. So 2 points to go at here. One, Republicans who say it's not the substance of the document that was leaked. It was the leak itself. And the Democrats now looking at this going, what does this mean for women, the impact going into the upcoming elections? How are you seeing this whole scenario right now?
Well, it's very troubling as far as I'm concerned. And I had on Mea Culpa Sam Donaldson, and we talked about this exact issue. Is it really the document, the content of the document that is disturbing, which it most certainly is, especially, for women's rights? But is it real, or is it the fact that they leaked the document? And what was the benefit or the purpose? And one of the things that we talk, because you can take it either way.
Right.
The question everybody is asking, who do you think leaked the document? Or as Trump used to go, they're all leakers. Quite frankly, they're just all leakers.
Right.
Leakers. I hate leakers. We all hate leakers. Right. I mean, but it's true. So the leak of the draft is a big problem. And you say to yourself, who do you think did it? Now, if, of course, you have a sinister mind and you want to play the whole conspiracy theory, you would say maybe Alito went ahead and leaked it himself. And you would say, well, why would he do such a thing? Well, maybe he wanted to gauge the temperature of what would be the reaction. Would this cause a massive problem for the Republicans? Is the leak of this opinion going to potentially change the November elections? Who knows? But then on the other hand, you could say, well, maybe it was one of the conservative judges that put it out there in hopes that maybe another conservative judge would turn around and say, you know what? I think we've gone a little bit too far here, Mike. All right. And then maybe we need to pull back. So instead of overturning Roe versus Wade, maybe we'll just change some of the terms and gut the draft. So it will curtail certain rights, but it won't eliminate Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I fall into that latter camp just based on my conversations with various people. I've been laughing because the egg that's going to blow back on Republican leadership and those out there seemingly praying that the perpetrator was a progressive hack who wanted to undermine the authority of the court. No, I think it's a cold, calculated political move by someone on the conservative side of the court who probably, because remember, this draft came out it's the February draft.
Right.
It's not the current draft they're working on. And I think what's happened is that one or two of those conservative justices that they have started to move off of this original draft, off of this complete ban and overturning of Roe versus Wade. And this was a check. This was to stop that bleeding, to sort of hemorrhage the effort, hemorrhage the movement away from, to the point you were just making, outright banning abortion. And so because for the Democrats at this point, why leak the February 13th? I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's draconian, that as we see in this draft, or something that even further chips away at Roe versus Wade, that basically undermines it, but still gives license and authority to what we see happening in Texas and elsewhere around the country. For them, it's still not good. So leaking this doesn't change their narrative, whether today or on June 30th. Doesn't change the narrative for Democrats. Roe versus Wade is under attack, and from their political messaging standpoint, it doesn't matter how you show that. For conservatives, it does matter, because for them, they want a complete outright ban. And if Amy Coney Barrett or Justice Brett Kavanaugh are moving off of that point, this is a direct slap on them to put them back in place. Makes it harder for them to make that move, because now you've got a document out here that says this is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so if the court comes back with something different, it's a different narrative. This is the box I think Republicans have put themselves in, and having been inside the rooms for many, many years, watching and listening to people craft the narratives around abortion, very much like healthcare. There's no after action item here, Michael. They have no plan for when the court actually says, okay,
right,
abortion is now illegal in the United States. There is no plan, people. You watched Mitch McConnell yesterday. It was almost like that moment in the garden when Peter is asked 3 times, and McConnell is like 3 times. That's not the issue I want to talk about. That's not why we're here. That's not the issue everyone is asking about.
He was like Porky Pig. That's all, folks. Right? I mean, look. I think the date actually on that draft was, the original one was what, February 10th, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, February 10th. And Ruth Marcus, who wrote an amazing piece in the Washington Post, turned around and she agrees with you. Now, again, I tried to preface my comment by saying, if you're into the whole conspiracy theory stuff and so on, most betting people agree with you that it was probably leaked by a clerk for one of the conservatives in hope of unraveling this sort of crazy draft opinion, which is so draconian in nature. And worse than that, it sets women's rights back, God knows what, 5 decades at least, since, of course, Roe v. Wade became the law of the land. And this bullshit about Constitution, and it's not, those words aren't in the Constitution. Neither is the word filibuster, by the way. Okay, so there comes a point in time when we have to acknowledge that our forefathers were much smarter somehow than we. I mean, if you think about the Constitution and the drafting of it, these men were truly brilliant. I mean, it was like having a whole room of Elon Musks sitting there, creating it. Because this document over, 250 years ago is still growing, it's breathing, it's living, and it's changing in order to meet changes in society, changes in technology. On my podcast last week, we were talking about the test tube baby. And my belief is that technology and science has outstripped our morals. It has outstripped the Constitution, because we have to take that into consideration. And I bring that up, and I think it was something like 1974, give or take, the test tube baby in England. People may remember this couple were having issues, and in vitro, they created the child in a laboratory in a test tube. I remember her name was something like Louise Joy Brown, something like that. And what's amazing about that whole story is it just goes to show you what technology can do. So then therefore, I mean, you could really get crazy and now start holding pharmacists and pharmacies and the drug manufacturer of the day after pill responsible. I mean, how far do we allow this to go? And once you strip this type of a right away from, forget about whether it's female or a male right, it's just the beginning of stripping people of rights that we have become accustomed to for 5 decades.
You know, it's funny. I am a study. I love to study human nature, and I love to study the nature of humans in particular scenarios. And the one thing that's always struck me about the pro-life movement, and look, I am, very much a pro-life Catholic, and there's a moral underpinning, but I also recognize fundamentally what my church teaches in this regard, but also the fact that God gave us all free will. So at the end of the day, the idea of choice was paramount. God recognized that in these beautiful creatures he created. He gave them this thing called free will and allowed them to make a choice. I just gave you an example of that choice. When Peter was confronted with truth, are you one of his followers? He had the choice to say, yes, absolutely I am. Or who? Jesus who? And 3 times he did that. So let us not forget that aspect of our nature. But I have been struck by the fact that as these things are now beginning to reemerge in the public square, that on the right, it's largely white men screaming about banning abortion. And on the left, it's largely white women talking about preserving the right to choose. And that dynamic for me is very telling when I'm looking at how people behave politically. I was seeing, and the point being, I was reading a tweet yesterday where someone was pointing out the fact that it was white women that helped elect Donald Trump and almost gave him the election back in 2020. And so the question was, so white women, what are you going to do now? And I was sitting there, I was thinking about this whole thing, how we strip out humanity, we strip out relationships, we strip away the dignity of individuals to make these very personal and private decisions. And we boil it down to, this group or that group, this class or that class. How do you see that sort of setting up narratives going into this fall, where we're not moving away from tribalism, but this decision and its concomitant pieces can exacerbate that tribalism?
Yeah, look, I'm with you on that. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, here's my feeling. None of Michael's business.
Right.
You be you and let me be me.
Right.
I don't want to step on your rights, right, nor do I want to allow you to step on mine. And all we have to do is sit back in our comfy couches or our chairs and just watch that dystopian television series, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Right. And then you turn around and you say to yourself, this is the beginning of it. What's next? They're going to say they stripped women of their rights to drive. How about their rights to vote, right? I mean, if you're able to take away a fundamental right of somebody to choose simply because you believe that life begins, at inception, and so, like I said, have the child, love the child, raise the child, have 100 children if God is good enough to give that to you. None of Michael Cohen's business. You be you and let me be me. But once you start jumping into this arena where, and everybody knew exactly what Donald was up to and what he was going to be doing when he put three, conservative, judges on, on the Supreme Court. Look, my hope with the leak is that it impressed upon at least one of them. So in that way, Roe v. Wade does not get overturned.
Right.
Changed?
Right.
Okay. I could deal with change. I would have no choice. But remember something too. One of the other fundamental issues in the Roe case is not about a woman's choice to decide. It was also a distinction between classes, between those who have money, the rich, versus the poor. Because rest assured, someone who has money, middle class, upper middle class, the top 1%ers, if in fact that somebody gets pregnant because of them, you just hop on an airplane, go to Switzerland, go to Germany, go to England, go to any place that you can have a safe abortion. What this opinion does, and I'm afraid for that because we've seen countless movies and stories and have heard countless stories about it, all of these back alley abortions. That's what's going to happen. It's not going to stop abortions for those people that want it. And then again, I go right back to the whole issue of the day after pill. Is that going to become illegal? Do you need to start stocking up on it so you could sell them at $10,000 a pill? Who knows?
Yeah, it raises a number of very important concerns, particularly with regard to how this will impact women of color, women in poor communities, women who do not have access to appropriate medical.
By the way, this is not, Michael, I don't mean to interrupt you, but this really isn't an issue of race or color. This is really a women with funds to pay.
But it
or
is
women without.
But
there are plenty of poor. There are plenty of poor white women out there.
Absolutely.
And what I hate to say is that many of them. But let me finish the point. Many of them are big Donald Trump supporters.
I got that, and I agree with that. Many of them are poor white women living in Appalachia and other parts of the country. I got that. But even in that narrative, the facts will show you that there's still a disparity, even within the community of the poor, between those who are white and those who are not. And so you just can't at any level just say, well, it's just about the class or just about the economy. It's all the economics. It's also about how that plays itself out as you move through these various communities.
I'll grant you that.
Yeah, it's not saying that one is greater or less or better or more. It is saying that in reading those 98 pages for that opinion, at no time did that opinion acknowledge that there was even some consideration for what the ongoing impact of this decision could be. And that goes back to the first point I was making, was that there has never been any consideration for what happens after you take away the right. Just as there was no consideration for what would happen if you took away healthcare. Repeal and replace, oh yeah, we'll repeal the hell out of it, replace it with what? So when they connected those two dots, they could not come up with a solution because there was no one thinking about, well, what does healthcare in this country look like if we take Obamacare away? So guess what? For 4 years, they did nothing. So the reality confronting a lot of people in the political space who have been advocates for this, who've not at the same time advocated for improving our adoption facilities and programs, improving the benefits to moms who decide to keep their children so that they, to your point, can raise their kids, care for their kids, et cetera. Putting in place the safety nets that society should put in place if it's going to mandate that you carry your child to term. No one's talked about that. And no one's ever really had that. And it's been one of my peeves as a pro-lifer within the pro-life community. In the speeches I've given, to pro-life organizations around the country is we got to stop acting like the only thing that matters here is the fetus and the survivability of that fetus. There's the long-term care for both the mother and the child that we should be advocating for as well. And that part no one is talking about in any of this, which is, again, to the broader debate about how we get tribal in this discussion, makes it difficult to actually deal effectively with the solution. You and I have a libertarian attitude about this, and I think it is the best attitude to have, and that is, you do you, boo. I'm not going to tread on your rights. You don't tread on my rights.
Right.
And the state has no role or place between you, your spouse or partner,
your significant other, your
partner, your priest, rabbi, or imam, or your doctor. All right, that's a space the government has no role in. And so here we find ourselves now going into a cycle in which this issue is more polarizing, certainly much more in the tribal communities, and women will, at the end of the day, yet again fall at the tip of that spear.
Yeah, but look, like you said it accurately, the Supreme Court has no business and they have no role in your bedroom. Plain and simple.
Yep. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're having a great conversation with my buddy Michael Cohen. We'll be back with Michael and his Mea Culpa podcast. Check it out, folks. It's good stuff. I was on it last week. We had a lot of fun. More with Michael right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to Michael Steele podcast. So we're having a great conversation with Michael Cohen, the infamous personal fixer for Donald Trump at one time, who has a podcast, and you describe your podcast. You've named it Mea Culpa. You state you're on a mission to right the wrongs you perpetrated on behalf of your boss, Donald Trump. How has that been for you? Has it been cathartic? Has it been eye-opening? What's that journey been like? And the second part is, do you find people dismissive of your movement in this space now, or leaning into try? Okay, so Michael, tell us more of what the hell's been going on.
Right. So I also came up with the name Mea Culpa because it's my initials, and that's where it all started from. It was like my initials, Mea Culpa. It all seems to ring true, and it all worked. And then this guy Jared Gustad, they call him Jingle Jared. He wrote for me the jingle to it, and I mean the song is just incredible. This is my Mea Culpa. It's fantastic, right? I mean, people loved it, and that gave the podcast life at the very beginning. Then, of course, I have a pretty significant social media presence, and then presence on whether it's MSNBC like yourself, CNN, ABC, NBC, and I had them put up the picture that you have into the back. We're now at about 23 million downloads in around the 18 months since we started. We've had some great guests, starting with my very first, Rosie O'Donnell, who is an absolute sweetheart. And the first thing that I did when I had her on the podcast is I apologized to her for the meanness, the actions that I even participated in at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald Trump when he went after her, for making fun of him, because you're not allowed to make fun of the king, right? I mean, you go make fun of the Fuhrer, watch what happens. So is it cathartic for me? Remember that at the time I started it, I was on home confinement. So other than my 2-hour walks in the park and my 1 hour permitted out to go to the gym in my building, I was home. Mm-hmm. And this gave me a way to help to create a movement, which is what I really consider Mea Culpa to be. It's a movement that I'm now using in social media to educate people, to make you open up your eyes, take the shit out of your ears, as my teacher used to tell me. Right? Take it out of your ears.
That wasn't a nun, by the way, right? That wasn't a nun who said
no, that was not. Right? Right, that I would have gotten whacked with a ruler. But to be honest, what it does is it gives me the opportunity to reach a broad swath of this country, whether it's as a result of mea culpa people listening or it gets picked up in the press all the time, to make you open your eyes and open your ears and listen to facts. Because as a country, we are being bombarded on a daily basis by misinformation, by disinformation, and now there's a new term, malinformation, and where it's coming from, by who it's coming from, and so on. And I don't want you to accept what I have to say and then just go along with it. That's the 38% of the individuals that are following Donald down into the dumpster fire of hell, right? I want them to have the facts, have the information, so that you can evaluate each and every, instance for yourself and make the most informed decision, whether is Donald Trump good for this country going forward? And I don't mean as president, because I stick with my opinion that he will not run in 2024. But will he be the kingmaker? Will he be a kingmaker in 2022? And then will he be the kingmaker in 2024, which could be potentially even more dangerous than him as the president? That fat piece of shit lurking around, walking around the Oval Office and so on, clogging the toilets, right? So that he can get what he wants, because he never wanted to be president of the United States. The whole thing was supposed to be the greatest infomercial in the history of politics. It's why I continued with the Trump Tower Moscow deal, because he never thought he was going to beat the Clinton machine.
Right.
I mean, you know that because he never showed up to the event at the hotel. And when he finally did, it was after he won, and they had just written like 10 minutes before the speech. So he is a danger to democracy, only because his brain operates in an autocratic, a monarch, a supreme leader, a Führer type mentality. And any one of your listeners who doesn't see that for what it is, it's dangerous.
Yeah. And to your point about being the kingmaker, he's had a good run just in the primary elections in Pennsylvania. He won 22 out of 22 candidates that he backed, including J.D. Vance, who turned into the sycophantic ass for Donald Trump from between 2016 and now, because the grift was on. He saw the opportunity to ascend to power and to gain power by getting touched by Trump. And so this will feed that particular narrative, but it also will feed that beast that you're talking about that will undermine the very tenets of democracy, because voters will now be confronted with putting in place people who don't give a shit about the Constitution and their rights. And if you don't believe me, it's not just about, what's happening to women on abortion. Let's talk about what's happening to voting rights. Let's talk what's happening to, the pressure that's going to come back around on immigrants. I mean, there's a whole number of areas that are governed by the Constitution that imbue rights on the people who are on this soil, that will now find themselves up against some particular hard rocks, given the kind of people who are now going to be elected to boards of elections and states attorneys and U.S. attorneys and certainly state officials who govern election and ballot box issues. So there's a lot to be concerned about here, but it appears to me, Michael, this is what the country wants.
Yeah, well,
we're not getting an indication that people are shying away from this.
Right. I'm not so sure that's what the country wants or the country needs. But I do want to bring up to you the issue of what we'll call it mutuality of benefit here, right? It's not as if Donald Trump took some nobody, right, and then backed, John Q. Public or Jane Q. Public,
Right.
and that person won over it, right? So yeah, you talk about J.D. Vance. Now, whether you like him or you don't, and I'm not particularly a fan, you got to give the guy a lot of credit for where he is. Yale law student. The guy is smart. He's well-spoken. And again, we're talking about Ohio. Right.
Well, what are we giving him credit for? We're giving him credit for being the J.D. Vance in 2016 who said that Donald Trump was America's Hitler, or are we giving him credit for being the J.D. Vance who took his cheek, he put his lips firmly on Donald Trump's butt cheek while Donald Trump was taking a shit? So which J.D. Vance should be giving credit to?
Well, actually, neither under those circumstances. But the point I was trying to make about the benefit. And this is where Trump is going to get the rudest awakening of his life. All right. Whether Vance wins or loses, ultimately to take Rob Portman's old seat, is irrelevant as it's going to relate to Donald Trump. Because once this guy comes into power, it becomes Donald who? All right, because he knows that Trump is going to try to push him over. Yes.
You think that? You really believe that?
I truly do.
Where have we seen
They are
that?
using him, Michael.
Where have we
they
seen
are
that,
using
Michael?
him.
Where have we seen that happen?
I'm going to tell you where. They are using him the same way he's using them. The only difference is they will ultimately rise to power. They will get the seat they want, and Trump will be that outsider who's going to be sitting there and calling up and saying, hey, JD, I need you to do me the following favor. And then, of course, there are going to be 9 people on the telephone. And, of course, JD's chief of staff is going to say, are you fucking for real, man? Do I need to slap you upside your head, you Yale law school moron? The guy's going to end up getting you, kicked out of Congress before you actually finish your first month because he doesn't give a shit. It'll be like a Raffensperger call. And on top of that, let's not forget, not only did Donald, of course, back JD, and he won it in the other 22, but one of those 22 was Greg Pence, Mike Pence's brother. So you got to, again, say to yourself, why did he back the brother of Mike Pence, allegedly the disloyal, Mike Pence, who could have overturned the entire election, hence January 6th, the guy who they built the gallows for in front of the Capitol? He did it because they knew that he was going to win based upon information that they have. And so he backed him so that he could turn around. Exactly. It's like betting on the favorite horse to win. But 9 out of 10 times he's going to win.
Different. J.D. Vance was losing that election. J.D. Vance 3 weeks ago was down by double digits and turned it around with Trump's endorsement. And so without that, J.D. Vance is not the nominee of the Republican Party for the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. So from my calculation, J.D. Vance is not necessarily going to break away from Trump when he becomes a U.S. senator. In fact, Donald Trump now knows he's got a U.S. senator.
No, but it's not. But Michael, it's not Pennsylvania. It's Ohio.
I'm in Ohio. I'm in Ohio.
Right. And that's Ohio. That's Ohio. I get it. He is wildly popular for some unknown reason in Ohio.
And let's Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona and a whole host of places where he holds down the point. So this idea that Republicans somehow are going to break away from Trump, to me, is a complete fallacy. There is no indication at this point in this process where you can point to me that any current or upcoming leader or elected official is willing to sacrifice their seat to break from Donald Trump.
I don't know. I have a funny feeling that's what you're going to see. And I believe it simply because the things he's going to ask them to do are illegal, right? And will end up not just getting them to lose the seat, but like what happened to me, finding your ass sitting in Otisville prison, in FCI Otisville. All right. And by the way, the FCI in Ohio is even worse than Otisville.
To do that after the election. They were willing to do that after you had people volunteering. Hey, put me in charge of Department of Justice, and I'll give you what you want. Clearly, there are people willing to go to jail for this man. So I look around and I go, all right, this is what we got. So yeah. Trump knows that. If he doesn't know anything, Michael, he knows that.
He certainly knows that he's able. He certainly knows, Mike, that he's able to get certain people to do
because they need him more than he needs them.
Well, I'm not so sure if that's true. Let's just say no less than they need him. Fair. He needs them.
Fair
but
enough.
I also, again, want to draw your attention to some of the Mark Meadows text messages, some of the text messages that others were saying behind his back. If you're willing to be stupid enough and to put it in a text message and send it to Mark Meadows, talking shit about the man that you're backing, that you're alleging you're going to, like I did stupidly, to take a bullet for the guy, and then you say the things that you do, well, what happens when you get the position that you want and he's legitimately no longer really as relevant as you think? Not to mention, there's still a slew of litigation that's pending against him. More will probably be forthcoming, right?
But Michael,
who knows?
But Michael, Mark Meadows is the same man who wrote a book and then in that book just outed Trump on COVID and a whole bunch of shit. Trump got mad, and this motherfucker comes out and says, my book is fake news. I mean, where do you go with that level of psychotic behavior that you would turn around and trash your own book that you just released because the guy you told the truth about is now mad at you?
Yeah, well, like we call them, sycophantic followers. But look, let's just make a dollar bet onto it, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. Because I've seen enough people turn on him, and rightfully so, because he will, like Brad Raffensperger, he will ask them to do things that is illegal. And it's one thing when you're in the middle of a campaign in order to become the nominee. It's another when you take office, and you know this well, you take office and then you get surrounded by an entire staff, from your chief of staff to your general counsel and so on. And these people will not go for it.
These people never had a Trump in their orbit before.
I agree with you
on
that.
Folks never had a Trump in their orbit who, at the end of the day, can amass a wave of crazy people against you. And
yes,
today, our modern day 21st century politicians, especially within the Republican Party as it is currently constituted, have not one ball among them. They are the weakest of the weak. They live in fear of not getting reelected or getting elected. It is what defines them. And if I know that about you, I use that because that's your kryptonite. I keep that kryptonite around your neck as much as I can, the way Trump has. And I just don't see these narratives changing inside the party anytime soon, that suddenly you're going to have I mean, look, Mitch, McCarthy, all of them lined up at the podium on January 7th, 8th, 9th to condemn Donald Trump, place the blame squarely at his feet for January 6th. By January 21st, 22nd, February 3rd,
not even that long.
They were like, oh, no, Trump had nothing to do with that. I don't know. Well, here you are on tape, sir. Let's play back what you said. Oh, that's not me. I didn't say that. I mean,
it's like that Twiggy song. It wasn't me.
It wasn't me. That's right.
It wasn't me.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. So here, one other good one for you. Did you have a burner phone?
I've never had a burner phone, which is another lie that was told about me. You know, that I had, that when the FBI raided my home, the hotel, my law office and so on, that they seized more than 14 burner phones. Okay, let me be very clear that there is a difference between your children's old Apple phones that contain photos on it that you just throw into a box because that's just what you do. There's no value to those phones. I've got a bunch over
here, exactly.
No, Michael, what you have is a bunch of burner phones, you fucking convict. All right, all right. Instead, with me, they became burner phones. These phones haven't been activated since they were deactivated to get the next iPhone that your kids and your wife get you to buy, right? And still, again, you throw them into a box because you have information on it. You're afraid someone's going to get it. You don't really want to smash them because there are photos onto it, and you don't know whether or not it's really up there in the cloud, because I truly don't understand the cloud. And so you keep them. For me, that became burner phones. Now, I spoke to a girl, her name was Jennifer Lawrence. And Jennifer Lawrence, not the actress, she spoke before the January 6th committee with her fiance, partner, Dustin, I forget his last name. And one of the things that they told me is that they have knowledge, and I spoke to a gentleman as well onto it, where he explained he was the one that went ahead and purchased 3 burner phones. Those are phones that have a phone number. You pick them up at like your Dwayne Reed, your CVS, Walgreens, whatever. You pay X amount of dollars. These were about $100 a clip because they had X amount of minutes onto it. And then when you finish with those minutes, you throw the phone in the garbage.
Right.
All right. That's a burner phone, one that's non-traceable to any individual, because when you get them at these stores, all you have to do is just, pay. And in this specific case, he was given money by Amy and Kylie Kramer, gave them $400. He gave her back close to $100. They bought 3 of them, and those were burner phones that I believe that were used during the January 6th insurrection as they were speaking with Mark Meadows inside.
Do they have ways
White
of tracking
House.
those phones have phone numbers? Do the phone
that they do?
Do those phone numbers go away, or
they do not, because they sit on Mark Meadows' cloud. Right. And what of course government is doing now, because they took the Kramers took the receipt from him, so that there's no evidence that they were ever bought, except the problem is he knows where he purchased them at. He knows how much money he gave, and there are receipts that go to the main office, and I'm sure that they've subpoenaed, and already our incredible law enforcement have gotten the receipt, including probably pictures of him purchasing them. So look, there's a big difference between the burner phone that I was alleged to have, which was a crock of bullshit. Something funny too. So one of the phones that they claim were burner phones was my wife's old BlackBerry phone. Mm-hmm. And BlackBerry is difficult to get into.
Yeah.
And so I ultimately speak to them, and they tell me that they're having a difficult time. So they sent this. I want you just to understand how dysfunctional we are as a country, especially when you have a fucked up president who has a fucked up attorney general that's willing to shit all over someone's constitutional rights like they did to me. But this was great. They said they couldn't get into the BlackBerry. They were having a hard time. And so they sent the BlackBerry to Quantico in order to open up the phone. I said, why don't you just ask me? Here's the number, 0123. That's the passcode. No, we don't want to know. We sent it to Quantico. We'll get it open. They never got it open. Instead, they returned it to me in 80 different pieces. I mean, they literally took the whole thing apart. And then they gave it back to me. I still have it. I think I kept it because I want to take pictures and put it up there on the internet. This is what I said. I'll give you the passcode. It's 0123. Right? That's the number that we do for all of the phones that we no longer use. So I said, one is the same as the other. Nope. Then the best part was when they also sent to Quantico the alleged, you'll remember this one, the alleged earth-shattering documentation that they got out of my shredder that
That's
was in my
right.
law
That's
office
right.
and so on,
Yeah.
which turned out to be 17 pages of bullshit garbage, including a bunch of, what happened was I filled up my garbage pail. And so instead of dumping the garbage pail, because the service comes in and takes it out of,
Right.
at night from the office. So instead I just stuck it into the shredder, right? Because the shredder was like a 10-gallon,
Right,
it was
right.
like a 10-gallon type shredder. It was really large. So I put it into that. And they're like, well, then they end up spending God knows how much money putting it back together, which some worked, some didn't work. They got a couple of envelopes from like First Republic Bank, crap that, was like some crazy email by some crazy lady that had an idea that the, government were putting microchips into her teeth. I don't how they got into our teeth. I don't know. But this is the kind of crazy stuff that they ended up pulling out of the shredder, which was for days upon days. Top secret. We've got him now. We've got Donald Trump now. If we would stick with the real issues, like what Alvin Bragg had, okay? If they would stick with those issues and nail him for the things that he's done, let's stop making stuff up on a guy who is fundamentally flawed. All right. We don't need to make up more shit about him. Just look at the fact he took like 170 millions of dollars, 170 million in tax refunds. Really?
Right.
Really? Donald, you took that much? Because why? You overinflated the value of the asset, the land. You gave off the back worthless land, which was swampland. And then you took $10 million an acre or something crazy like that. All right. That's not proper. That's fucking fraud. And let's get him on that instead. Alvin Bragg. Oh, I'm not really sure Michael Cohen is credible. Really, it's funny because Mark Pomerantz and Carrie Dunn, who have been on this for 2 years, the same two people who have been practicing law before Alvin Bragg was out of diapers, turned around and said every single thing that I gave them was accurate, truthful, and spot on, and corroborated either by somebody else's testimony or by documentary evidence. But that's okay, Alvin.
Why
right?
do
you know better after 6 weeks.
Why do you think that's that part? That has been an interesting aspect of all of this, going back to Mueller, before Mueller, when it comes to Donald Trump, that when you've got the goods, no one wants to believe them. Nobody wants to pursue it. No, everyone's. I mean, I'm looking at what's going on in the union. Letitia is like, she's about her business, but I have no idea what the brother's doing. He's just kind of sitting there, just kind of going, people quitting because he's not wanting to pursue the work of the office in the state's attorney's office. What is it about Donald Trump that makes people just sort of give up going after him?
Yeah, it's an incredible story that one day we will ultimately find out what's going on in Alvin's mind. I don't know the answer. Cyrus Vance goes ahead and he indicts Alan Weisselberg, the CFO at the Trump Organization, as well as the Trump Organization itself. And that case is still continuing. But then, of course, the big fish here is Donald. One of the issues that makes it difficult to prosecute Donald is the fact that he's never had an email address and he doesn't text from his own phone. It's always somebody else doing it. So because mens rea, intent, is such a significant part of these cases, can you get past based upon, other evidence? Can you get past the reasonable doubt theory, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt theory. Now, this is where I fundamentally disagree with Alvin. The job of the DA, the job of a prosecutor, is not to convict. The job of a prosecutor is to make a determination whether or not there's substantial or there's significant enough evidence within which to warrant an indictment and a prosecution. You leave the conviction up to the jury or the judge if it's a bench trial. It's not supposed to be predetermined. Yeah, fuck him, we got him. All right, next, right? Let's see the next guy that we can kill. That's not the job of a prosecutor. However, as I note in the book that I'm writing now called The Department of Injustice, which will come out in like maybe 2-3 months, all about my case starting with the Steele dossier to the unconstitutional remand. Prosecutors, when they start telling you about their 98% conviction rate, that's when you know that it's not for them about the law. It's not about doing the right thing, about, honoring the badge that you were given in order to affect somebody else's life, but rather their own self-interest. Because in my specific case, 2 went to Lowenstein Sandler, 1 went to Davis Polk, 1 went to McDermott, Will and Emery, 1 went to Paul Weiss. 1 went to Guggenheim Partners. Really? Seriously? Right? Rest assured, I met each and every one of these Southern District of New York prosecutors, and not one of them impressed me. We're not talking about Judge Learned Hand here, or Judge Cardoza. Rest assured, I promise you that. These are people that used me as a high-profile case in order to pad their biography, which each and every one of them do in the very first line of their bios, right? So that they can get 7-figure jobs. And that's another danger to our country, because rest assured, it happened to me. It could happen to you tomorrow. Yeah. And if Donald Trump becomes the kingmaker, as you so state, all right, if he becomes, God forbid, 1,000,000 times the 2024 candidate and then the president, rest assured, Mike, you, me, a whole slew of journalists, a whole slew of individuals, you're going to have another willing and complicit asshole like Bill Barr sitting there violating, like they did mine, your First Amendment constitutional right, and remand your ass right off to FCI.
No, I take to heart that warning, because it is a very accurate one. I keep telling people the 4 years of another Donald Trump term is retribution city. It's all about payback. It's about getting back at those that he felt wronged him, and fixing the system this time so that mistake of 2020 doesn't ever happen again. That's the bottom line.
His enemies list is going to be like the same length as the Torah, right? And you're gonna roll that
just
thing
gotta roll it
to
out.
the very beginning, and then you're gonna have to turn it and then roll it a little more. You're gonna have to have your pointer on. Let's see the next 100 people we're gonna fuck up their lives. All right, because we can, and because you have. I'm dying to know who would be the next willing and complicit Bill Barr, and that's another issue. I'm trying to get Bill Barr on mea culpa. I'd like to ask him a bunch of questions to see if he has the guts to stand up and to actually own what he did, instead of him just turning around and, making these bold statements. Well, I think Donald Trump was wrong, and Donald Trump should, was involved in the January 6th. Oh, geez, thanks, Bill. You know what? You're so wonderful. We should now invite you back into polite society because you acknowledged an insurrection or a coup on our Capitol was wrong, and that Donald should have stopped it. Oh man, no one better than you there, Bill.
We're all gonna sleep better tonight.
I won't have any more PTSD or any more rotten dreams.
Right.
Thanks, Bill. You just saved me thousands of dollars in therapy.
Thank Michael Cohen, you the man. I appreciate you, brother, so much for taking time to stop by the podcast and hang out. It was a pleasure hanging out with you on your podcast, Mea Culpa. Thank you for joining the Michael Steele podcast. It's always a treat, my friend.
Yes, it is. And let me just say this to all of you listeners. Mea Culpa is not just a podcast, it's a movement, as is the Michael Steele podcast. Listen, join, follow, subscribe, everything, just so that we can all stay in touch together. Because rest assured, if everything that we've talked about, we may make light of it simply because if we don't, we'll all be crying. All right. We need people to become active. We need people to get angry. We need to fight what the Republicans are doing. We need to fight them the same way that they're fighting the Democrats, and they're fighting democracy. So, I just wanted to throw that in before I say my goodbyes. And As always, I hope to see you soon, my friend.
You got it, bro. Absolutely. And I appreciate the shout out. And I think it's important folks take to heart certainly that point Michael just made about getting engaged in this process, because really it is democracy on the line here. So it's important that we all recognize how we as citizens have been empowered by that very document to assert the rights that are given to us under the Constitution. And you got to fight for that every day. Thanks, guys, for paying attention and stopping in. Don't forget to check us out on the Spreaker app, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever you get your downloads. I love it when you do that. Check out this episode for sure. If you like it, comment on the Spreaker app. We appreciate that because it makes me improve what I try to bring to you every week. And until next time, be safe, be well, take care, and God bless.